Welcome to the Culture Think Tank, where we discuss the trends and analytics of culture facing us today. Our goal is to help provide insights and best practices organizations and leaders can use to strengthen their cultures during today's new normal. I'm Will Lindstrom, and here with me is my partner, Delise Crimmins. Good morning, Delise.
Hey, good morning, Will. How are you?
Doing well. This week, we've been discussing the challenges organizations face when transitioning people to a work from home environment. And during our discussions, we've identified some common themes. So 3 of the most common themes that we've identified so far to date is, number 1, we've got to make sure that there's an effective workstation for people to work from an extended period or work for an extended period of time at home. Working off of a laptop 1 day or 2 days is one thing. Trying to do that for 3 or 4 days when you're used to multiple screens, full-size keyboards, it's a whole nother kind of animal to deal with. The second thing we've been hearing is that we have to really rethink the traditional 8 to 5 day, primarily because so many people nowadays have their children at home and are also responsible for educating their children while they're home as everything's shut down. So that's one of those things where we have to start worrying about how do we rethink the day and how do we rethink our planning and how do we rethink how we approach it and work together. And the final thing is really, it's all about building trust and making sure that people feel that you believe in them, make sure that people feel that they can reach out for them. And a lot of the key factors that we're seeing that help build trust during this period of time are patience, flexibility, and giving people autonomy to get things done when it's best for them to get it done. And at this point in time, I'll pass it off to Delise, who's going to introduce our new guest speaker.
Great, thanks, Will. So we have the opportunity today to talk to a business owner. His name is Tim McClanahan. He is a partner in a wealth management firm that focuses on retirement and estate planning in New Orleans. And welcome, Tim. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So in this situation, I know a little bit about your firm personally, and I know that you have been deemed by Homeland Security as an essential business. So you had the opportunity to keep your people there or send them home. So tell us a little bit about that. What does it look like in your offices right now, and who's home and who's in the office?
The advantage, we think, to having been deemed essential has allowed us the flexibility to be very creative with our workforce. We've allowed them to be adults and to make their own decisions relative to, are you more comfortable working at home, or feel free to come to the office. One of the advantages we have from a structural standpoint is our office building is fairly large, and because of technology, we have fewer bodies today than we had, say, 15 years ago. So our ability to social distance within the office is fairly strong. Aside from the kitchen, the restrooms, and the copy area, we really can keep our distance from one another on a fairly simple basis. That being said, we wanted to not dictate to people how they work and not dictate to them what they need to do for their own families. So late last week, we implemented our work from home policy and gave each of them the choice. If you need to be home because you've got little kids, if you need to be home because you've got loved ones to care for, if you're just more comfortable being at home based on everything or how little we know about what's going on from a contagion standpoint, then you need to be able to do that, and we wanted to support that.
So you've got part of your workforce that's still coming into the office every day and part of your workforce that's mobilized from home, correct?
Yeah, so we have 4 people who I have quote unquote forbidden from coming in. They are all over 70, and so therefore they're at-risk class. So we have asked them to specifically work from home. Mm-hmm. I've got another 3 who have chosen to work from home, and that leaves 7 of us here in the 4 walls of the office.
Okay. So how do you, as a leader, how do you manage that? How are you managing that bifurcated workforce?
Well, what I have found is I am much more communicative today than probably I ever have been. I've got one partner who believes in the old philosophy of management by walking around, and you can't really do that these days. Can't just pop in your office and plop down and have a little chat. Everybody's a little on edge when it comes to that. So what we've done is we've amped up our email communication. I have been particularly stringent on the two department managers who have the most bodies who are out of the office to make sure that they are checking in at least twice a day. And it's been a fine line. It's not that I'm trying to check up on the people. It's that I don't want them to feel completely disconnected.
How's productivity been? Have you seen a difference in productivity out of the office versus in the office?
The interesting thing that the people who are out of the office, their functionalities are more long-term oriented as opposed to reactive. So it's hard for me to judge if they're continuing to push forward at the same pace or not. Their deadlines tend to be longer frame. So if I give you to the end of the month, I don't micromanage people. We don't micromanage people around here. It's a waste of time in most cases. So I won't really be able to assess that until a little more space has been created and look at it back in hindsight.
What do you anticipate the biggest struggle to be with that bifurcated workforce?
Well, the one struggle I didn't notice but was pointed out to me is if you're working from home, you can work in your PJs. If you're coming to the office, you really can't do that. So we've had to relax our dress code for those who've chosen to come in the office. That was one thing I didn't consider on the front end, the flexibility that you get if you stay at home versus the relative inflexibility of coming into the office. So that was one unanticipated adjustment we had to make kind of on the fly, which was not a big deal, but it was something that needed to be addressed because it created an unlevel playing field.
Sure. We anticipate when we bring people back into the workforce, that's going to be an adjustment too. I've been working in my pajamas for the last 2 months. Now I'm going to have to put regular clothes on. So we'll talk about the challenges on the backside once we get there. What's the one thing, Tim, that if you were talking to someone who was doing something like this, where they have a workforce at home and a workforce in the office, what's the one bit of advice that you give to them?
I think the one bit of advice, especially just because of our size, I've got two business partners, and then I have two department managers that, from a hierarchical standpoint, fall beneath. The consistency of message is really super important when you're delivering it in multiple fashions.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an employee meeting and one person's talking, it's pretty clear everybody heard the same thing. Now, they're not always going to hear it the same way, but they're hearing the same words. But if I'm telling you it's okay for you to wear, jeans in the office because you're coming to the office, and then I turn around and tell the stay-at-home employee, everything I'm reading says you should get up and take a shower and get dressed and not work in your PJs as best you can. It sounds like two different messages. And if it comes from a place of consistency, then the messages can be married to one another. But if I've got a department manager telling you, hey, you got to get dressed, and then the quote-unquote boss tells you, hey, you can dress down to come to the office, that sounds completely contradictory. So the consistency of message is really, I think, extremely important when you have a bifurcated workforce.
Yeah, we talked to a couple of other people and talking about how building trust is about predictability. So it sounds like you're talking about predictability in your messaging as well.
I think that's fair.
Do you think it's going to affect your culture with your workforce being divided like that?
I think it has the potential to completely blow up the culture, which from some perspectives might not be a bad idea. What my concern is as long as this lasts, the longer this lasts, rather, I've got two people who are working from home who I'm a little concerned will get a little too used to it. Mm-hmm. They both tend to want to be islands in their sort of normal interactions, and to give them the ability to make that even more stark concerns me from a long-term perspective. I don't think that we will be very comfortable having this set up, longer than is necessary. I think it's very nice to know we can do it. Living in Southeast Louisiana, we have hurricanes, every year, and the big one, Hurricane Katrina, we were all scattered and nobody knew how to do anything, and cell phone service wasn't what it is today, and the ability to work from remote locations wasn't what it is today. So having this experience is helpful in that realm. It will make the stress of hurricane season a little bit different for us going forward, I think. My concern is that I'm going to have one or two who come back in and say, you know what, I really like working from home and I really don't need to be here, which may or may not be true.
Right.
I just don't think it's going to be something we as a small business are going to be super supportive of.
To extend the work from home, like I could do it, so why can't I do it all the time?
Correct.
Okay. And the whole Katrina phenomenon, do you see people reacting differently, or do you think they react differently because they've had that experience, fairly recently, a traumatic experience?
Well, I think we collectively in this area of the country, we wanted to compare it to Katrina, compare this to Katrina. And it's not an apt comparison in the sense of, post-Katrina, there were no grocery stores that were open. We can spend hours talking about the toilet paper phenomena that exists, but literally there wasn't any because the roads were messed up and the delivery trucks couldn't get to the stores. There were no people to work in the stores because everybody was scattered. So it's not really an apt comparison, with the exception of this is a new normal. You've got to figure out ways to get stuff done that are not in the norm. You talk about having everybody, having your whole family at home all the time, 24/7, 365. It's a whole different deal than, people coming home from school, kids leaving for school, coming home from school. It's just different when everybody's there, sort of sitting on top of one another and the walls start to close in. So that effect is similar to Katrina. You had families, generational families that all had to find a place to live, and you'd have 2 or 3 generations in the same, 4 walls. And so that, by that token, it's a very similar feeling, but the actual reality of it is completely different because there are services available. Post Katrina, you didn't know where you're going to be able to get gasoline for your car. So you would drive around with an extra gallon or so in your trunk. That was the norm because if you found it, you got it. Well, we don't have a gas shortage at this point. So those are the differences, but there's some sense of similarity insofar as it is a shared experience and we are all sort of stuck in the same boat.
Guess it's good to know it could be a little worse, huh?
It can always be worse.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim. Thanks for sharing your insights with us, and best of luck with managing your workforce from home and from your office. It sounds like you're doing a great job.
Well, we are doing the best we can, just like everybody else.
Thanks again, Tim. We're approaching the end of today's segment. As always, we like to close with the key takeaways and best practices. So I think what we've learned today is very consistent to what we've been hearing going forward, is that communication is very important. And I think that to stress the consistency of communication, especially if people are in a matrix organizations where they have 1, 2, possibly 3 different people they report to. So that's going to be an important factor. The second thing we heard that is important is the balance between checking in and micromanaging. That's always a difficult balance. You want to keep people connected. You want people a part of the organization. But if you over communicate or you over check in, you can start to create a sense of micromanagement and actually defeat what you're trying to do. And the last is that a lot of what we're facing today is going to be changing the cultural norms for good or for ill. But I think we just have to recognize that as people stay away from home or work from home and stay away from the office, those cultural norms are going to be stressed and changed and adapting. So as people come back into the organization, addressing culture and help people re-enter the workforce and re-enter what was normal before this new normal will be a challenge that everybody's going to have to address and be sensitive to. So please join us tomorrow. We'll continue our conversation about the disruption of in the workplace by people moving remote. Tomorrow we'll be joined by Aiden Crimmins. Aiden is a recent graduate of the University of Texas who is working remote for the first time. All righty, everybody. Thank you so much, and we look forward to the discussion tomorrow.
Thank you. Stay safe, y'all.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.